gonna be a great day. Yes? This is gonna be an awesome debate, right? This touches the core of the civil service and how people see them, right? Why I must work staggered hours, or I want to work staggered hours. We're ready. Good morning and welcome to this fifth staging of the Public Sector Debate Competition. We're delighted to have you join us for this milestone staging of the competition, including those of you who have joined online. I'm Aniki Clark, Communication Lead here in the TIU, and it is my extreme pleasure to be your host for this match. Some of you will know that over the years, this competition has really been a catalyst for bold ideas, strengthened connections among public sector workers, and it has also brought a vibrant energy to the public service, right? Yes? Right. We're sure of that. I see it on display. The past 4 editions have delivered truly engaging debates and insightful perspectives, with each year raising the standards even higher. This year, we have a record-breaking 32 teams going after the title of Debating Champions. Yes, that's good. Now the stage is set for yet another exciting season, and we're eagerly anticipating the moments ahead. Last year's champions, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining, have returned to defend their title. But will they hold on to the crown? Or will a new team rise to seize that trophy and claim those coveted bragging rights? Teams? Yes. Awesome, we love it. Today, we kick things off with the first preliminary round of matches and continue through to Thursday, followed by the second preliminary round on May 12, 13, and 14, to decide the teams that will advance to the next round. First out the blocks this morning, we have 2 returning teams. The Cannabis Licensing Authority and the Water Resources Authority. You realize they're both clad in black and authorities at the end of both of their names. So, you know, things are shaping up quite nicely, we think. And their moot this morning that they will be debating is, be it resolved that staggered working hours in Jamaica should be pursued as a national workforce policy rather than as a reform limited to the public sector. A very timely and indeed topical moot, and I'm sure you're looking forward to the arguments. But let's get to meet the teams that will be putting forward their best arguments, beginning with Team Proposition.
Good morning. My name is Reinhard Stamp, and I'm your first proposition speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Johnson. I'm your second speaker.
Good morning, everyone.
My name is Theo Clayton. I'll be a third speaker.
Thank you very much, Team Cannabis Licensing Authority. And we now invite Team Opposition to introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Jeffrey Marshall. I'll be the first speaker.
Good morning, my name is Kimar Marie Douglas and I'll be the second speaker.
Good morning, my name is Desmond Wellington and I'll be your third speaker.
I see Desmond's voice has stuck something. We look forward to his arguments, right? Our adjudicators for today's match are our partners from the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE. Judges, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ravon Thomas Matthews, and I'll be serving as the chair judge for this match.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kaliseti Vassal, honored to serve as a women adjudicator of this.
All right, and I guess they've saved the best for last. All right.
Good
morning,
job.
everyone. My name is Najani Stewart, and I'm one of your women adjudicators for this match.
Thank you so much, judges. So everybody has met everybody, right? We are no longer strangers. And it's now over to the judges. The teams are familiar with the rules. And I will now take my seat and listen to the arguments. Judges, over to you. Good luck, teams.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, welcome to the first match in round one. You are privileged to kickstart this competition in a fine fashion. So we're going to, of course, be using the JADE parliamentary format, and the format goes as follows. First speakers, you'll have 7 minutes to present your case. Second speakers, you'll have 6 minutes. The third speakers, you'll have 5 minutes to present your substantive cases. It's important to note that the first and last minute of each speech is considered protected time. That means for your first minute and your last minute, no points of information will be allowed. Outside of that, points of information are allowed. And you know what, we encourage it. It makes a fun debating. Of course, unique to the JADE parliamentary format, we have 2 periods of cross-examination where you will ask questions and answer them from each other. But don't worry, we'll get into that in just a bit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with the rules out of the way, we know. Indeed, and you'll hear the indication of your time signal via a bell. It's gonna go ding like that. So when you exited your first period of protected time, you're gonna hear it ding once. Once you've entered into your second period of protected time, that's the last minute of your speech, you're gonna hear it once again. Once you've used up all of your allocated time, you're going to hear the bell ding twice, like that. And at the end of that, we have a 15-second grace period. Once that 15 seconds is up, the bell will ding continuously. That means that the judges are no longer listening and you should yield the floor. All right, so with that said, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege to kickstart this, the first match of the 2026 staging of the public sector debate competition. We invite the first speaker from the Cannabis Licensing Authority to take the stage. Here, here.
Good morning, adjudicators. Today, we on Team Proposition stand on the side of progressive change, sustainability, and the health of our country's most important resource, the people, and ultimately, the improvement and success of Jamaica's economy. We are strongly proposing that staggered working hours should be pursued as a national workforce policy, rather than a reform limited to the public sector. And anything else is complete and utter insanity. It promotes exclusivity, of which 1.4 million of our workforce makes up the private sector. So let me just remind you all, insanity is repeating the same action of standardized 8-hour shifts, but expecting different outcomes. Are you suffering, Mr. Marshall, from long hours in traffic? Is your family eating dinner without you? Are you tired of not catching the bank? The remedy lies in shift. We are proposing the shift policy. And shift stands for smarter working hours, higher economic activity, inclusivity and accessibility, flexible work life with balance, and traffic reduction and infrastructure relief. All the benefits that come with staggered working hours, which when applied, achieves national consistency, growth, and sustainability. We are proposing this national workforce policy framework, which is adaptable, adjustable, and applicable in many areas of the private sector, from banking, manufacturing, to, of course, the BPO. Staggered working hours must be pursued, and our policy is called SHIFT. Just to clear the smoke, staggered working hours is defined as a system of working in which the employees of the organization does not all arrive or leave at the same time, but there are large periods of overlap. A national workforce policy refers to a high-level overarching plan or framework implemented by government to manage labor, skills training, employment standards across the country. And reform is the changes or improvements to a law, social system, or institution. So for us, staggered working hours, our shift policy, is what will bring about this change. And let's take a look, because sometimes you have to take a step back and look at where we're coming from. Our standard working hours are rooted in what was slavery. 10, 14 hours, as long as the sun was going up or going down, that would be the time that you'd be working. And coming out of that, because of the experiences the knowledge gained and experiences of the employees, Henry Ford more popularized the 8-hour working shift. And from that time in the 19th century till now, we have not changed or progressed in any way. So for us, Jamaica has to stop to enhance economic growth towards the goal of Vision 2030. Our view is the shift policy must go right across the nation. Myself and my colleagues will present shift and provide you with the benefits, proving the stance that it is a necessity for our application. So first, smarter working hours. That is not only identifying the employer's need to cover peak time, where there is a high level of traffic, but also considers the employee's personal well-being, what it is that's going on in your life. For example, giving the morning people and the not morning people the opportunity to do their best work at the times where they prefer. Smarter working hours allows for families to sort out familial business. Dependents are sent off to school, or if it is that you're giving care to the elderly, you may be able to be present until that caregiver comes or someone is able to relieve you for you to move on to work. H, the higher economic activity means that businesses can operate over extended or opening over an extended time period, giving them the opportunity to serve more patrons, conducting more business, creating more revenue. So if a restaurant in Halfway Tree, anyone that we want to find, wants to open it at 8 o'clock to serve breakfast and a midnight snack at 12, they're free to do so. The policy allows for each individual, each organization to make that decision, what is best for them. And on the other side, for our manufacturers, a lot of the manufacturing processes are highly energy dependent. And if it is that it's applied properly, they could see a reduction in the cost of their production because there are off-peak times, something where there isn't much activity on the grid, and they're able to turn on certain machines that may draw more power, thus reducing the cost. And the difference is really great. Between peak times and off-peak times, there's a reduction of minimum 50% in the cost of the electricity that is being run. So if it is that they want to run it for 8 hours, that's fine. But they are already saving and still maintaining their production standards. As a nation, we cannot continue to do the same thing, operating in the same way with set working hours across all sectors. We must recognize that the world has progressed past the make hay while the sun shines. And with that, we have to also. The shift policy is an important step in creating the environment for innovation giving business owners and operators who are otherwise not cognitive of the opportunities the chance to assess and apply the shift policy where feasible. And the government has a responsibility to lead. And they've done that. They've set the framework in place for the rest of the private sector to follow. And as long as they see it feasible, they should apply it right across the board. So if banking is an issue and you have issues that you need to go into the bank for, you may have an extended working time for the bank instead of them locking the same time your work closed. So with this, my friends, we have to understand that staggered working hours is for everyone. It should have never been just a public sector initiative. Each person who is a part of the public sector should be able to gain from the private sector having these extended working hours, and the private sector should also be able to benefit from this. And so, as we are closing, friends, we've been stuck in first gear for too long. It's time to sink the clutch and shift into a new gear. I thank you.
And thank you very much. That was the first speaker from the Cannabis Licensing Authority. At this point in time, we invite the first speaker from the team in opposition to open the case for the Team Water Resources Authority. Hear, hear.
Esteemed judges, distinguished opponents, and my fellow Jamaicans, we, the members of the Double Raise debate team, stand resolutely opposed to the caption Moot. Be it resolved that staggered working hours in Jamaica should be pursued as a national workforce policy rather than as a reform limited to the public sector. The key parts of this Moot: staggered working hours, in alignment with what my opponent said, employees starting and finishing work at different times to ensure the required coverage. Pursued means to find or employ measures to obtain or accomplish, and policy, as defined by the Jamaican government's policy register, a course of action to be taken by the government to resolve a given problem or interrelated set of problems. So in other words, we oppose the view that the Jamaican government should find or employ measures to implement a course of action across the Jamaican workforce, private and public, that results in all Jamaican employees in private and public starting and finishing work at different times of the day. I will show that national policies are for critical issues and staggered working hours is not a critical issue, and that frameworks already exist for implementation of these actions by the private and public sector. My second speaker will show that this policy, if implemented, will be government overreach and micromanagement, and that the benefits of staggered working hours are grossly exaggerated. So I will address one point made by my opponents on traffic. To tie staggered working hours to traffic is a failed attempt to address a symptom, not a cause. The core causes of high traffic are school influenced, insufficient road capacity, and inadequate options for public transport. Staggered working hours will not address traffic issues as long as the staggered hour parents have to stagger to the non-staggered school drop-off and pickups every morning and evening with their children. It would still be an issue. Our first point is to question whether or not the concept of staggered working hours is of sufficient national importance to require the infrastructure needed to establish a national policy. Because that if we believe that the pursuit of national policies are best suited for critical matters, such as providing universal access to potable water for all Jamaicans by 2030, or the sustainable development of our natural resources. When compared to these matters, the issue of whether or not I can come to work at 6:30 versus 8:30 seems to pale in significance to these other goals. It would be a waste of energy and resources to develop a policy for such a narrow option of staggered working hours. This does not mean that flexible work arrangements is unimportant. Indeed, it is very important. Our second point is to emphasize that there is currently legislation, not policy, but legislation, which already allows employers to establish flexible working arrangements, including but not limited to staggered working hours, as per their own policies developed quite nicely without government intervention. Thank you very much. The Employment Act of 2014 was developed in consultation with multiple stakeholders in the private and public sector, and it provides a legal framework for the implementation of flexible work arrangements, including but not limited to staggered working hours. One crucial part of this act is the following statement: the employer will have to determine the type of flexi work which best suits his or her organization, having regard to factors such as the nature of the organization. Taken?
Those policies that were developed by the public and private sector, even though it's a joint collaboration, it was geared towards making the policy for the public sector, but is not included for the private sector. It was an initiative,
The act was developed in consultation with the public and private sector, and the act is stated very, very clearly there for both private and public sector. Furthermore, even before the act was coming in 2014, the staff orders of 2004 already established the provision for flexible working hours in the public sector, including staggered working hours from 2004 till now, from 2014 till now. It exists already. If the government now seeks to find or employ measures to promote the specific option of staggered working hours across the Jamaican workforce, then government would be, in effect, compelling the employer to ensure that their workers are able to utilize the staggered working hours option, even if the employer has already determined that staggered working hours aren't really going to work for me. That violates the Constitution, it violates the labor laws, it violates the Employment Act, and it violates common sense. Indeed, it is clear that many private sector companies already utilize staggered working hours in some form under this legislation framework. The existence of shift systems in the tourism sector and the BPO sector and manufacturing sectors, all of these have already implemented staggered working hours under the legislative framework given by the Employment Act of 2014 without the interference of government policy busy work. It would be unwise for the government to place all of its proverbial eggs in the staggered working hours basket, lest the staggering lead to an unfortunate, unplanned omelette. My fellow opponents and members, we, the RRA, stand resolutely opposed to saying that staggered working hours should be promoted and pushed when there may be other options to solve the problems that have been identified by the proposition. Staggered working hours are an option. They are not the only option, and they should not be pushed in opposition to every other option that may be. We pause at this juncture.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are at now that period of cross-examination. So for this particular period, we'll see opposition first posing 3 questions to the team in proposition. Each question will be limited to 10 seconds and each answer will be limited to 45 seconds. It's important to note that for the team who is asking the question, only one member of the team may do so at any given point in time. However, for the team that is answering the question, the entire team can contribute to provide the most robust answer as long as it fits within that 45-second period. After the 3 questions have been asked and answered by opposition, we will invite proposition to do the same. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we invite the first question from the Water Resources Authority.
Is this on? If the private sector self-regulates where flexibility makes commercial sense, what gap does your policy fill that the market is not already filling?
Thank you for that question, team opposition. The policy that we're proposing that the government should implement is addressing a framework such that is accessible to all the country, not just a limited few. So even though some persons have taken the initiative perhaps to address these gaps, we're seeing a policy or framework is being implemented where everyone can benefit from, including those who do not know that they can have such an arrangement.
Why would your policy promote staggered working hours as opposed to other flexible working arrangements?
Oh, it's working. Other flexible arrangements can be adhered to and can be followed. However, in the spirit of the Moot, we are discussing and highlighting one such case in which staggered hours can be and ought to be implemented by the entire population. So we're not just focusing on flexi work arrangements. That is not what the Moot is about, but we're focusing on staggered, showing you why it is important and showing you that this benefit can drive a greater change to which other initiatives can even be developed and implemented right across Jamaica. Jamaica is a righteous thing to do.
Considering it excludes shift workers, how can your policy produce the national benefits that you think it would produce? Considering that the staggered working hours excludes shift workers, how can your policy produce the national benefits that you think it might produce?
So the staggered working hours policy doesn't exclude those who are working on shifts. It basically provides those who don't work on any an opportunity to be a part of one. So the shift system that exists now, where you may be needing to cover a 24-hour period, would be a part of the staggered working hours. It would still fall under what we consider the staggered working hour policy to cover. So it's just making it available for those who may not be working in a 24-hour sector like emergency or the BPO sector for that matter. It has to be based on those unique situations. The application will be guided, or at least guided through by the business owners or the business operators.
Very much. We now invite the 3 questions to be posed from Team Proposition, the Cannabis Licensing Authority.
All right. Team Opposition, I would like to ask you, why do you think this policy should be only geared for the public sector and not for the private sector or the entire Jamaican populace?
Is not that the policy should not be limited to the public sector. Our policy is that the government should not be pushing the policy beyond what has already been established to everyone that's available. The options already exist for the private sector to implement this if they so desire, as according to what's best for them in their estimation, and it would not be for the government to further impose any such restriction on them beyond the framework which already exists.
Thank you for that response, Team Opposition. My follow-up question to that, based on what you have said in your speech, is that there's a policy and there's acts in place. I would like to ask you, being that the act is mandatory and a policy is something that can be accessed to all, why is it that you're refuting that a policy should be implemented for the benefit of Jamaica?
The existence of an act already provides a legislative framework for those who believe that this will benefit them to go forward and do so. In that case, if there is an issue that needs to be solved, then the issue that should be done to fix the problem would be to change the underlying conditions. If you put in a policy to enforce a behavior without changing the problems that led to the issues in the first place, then you are in effect setting up something that is geared to fail. So looking at the existing framework that says you can have flexible work arrangements, you can have a staggered working hours if you so desire, then it would be now for each entity to see for themselves. If you have an issue with traffic, then the issue should be to say, what are the traffic problems, like we said. Changing the hours is not going to lead to less traffic if there is a situation already where the traffic continues to be caused by something that this problem will not solve.
Thank you again, Team Proposition. I would like to say that this is one of the solutions to those problems, that an entire and wholesome solution. So the question is, if you are believing that an act is the solution and policies are geared to drive and change and guide acts as well as regulations, why are you opposing that a policy be implemented? You have not answered that question.
A policy is stated is something where the government will take action, take some necessary act or activity to ensure that this is done from a national level. And we are saying that the work has already been done. To emphasize and to invest resources on this particular option as opposed to other options which may exist to solve the problem would be a narrow focus on something that was not yet shown to be successful or to have the impact that it is claimed to have.
All right, thank you very much for that first period of cross-examination, both teams. At this point in time, we invite the second speaker from Team Proposition to extend the case for Team CLA.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine, it's month end, it's Friday, rain is falling. Where are you? Chances are you're stuck in traffic. Did you hear or experience the April 17th corporate traffic gridlock? I'm suffering from post-traffic stress disorder. Are you? Oh, the horns, the horns, the horns. I tell you, these horns. We want to see the new and improved Jamaica where a 10-minute drive is exactly what it is, a 10-minute drive. My opponents have stated that it is not critical. Spending 4 to 6 hours in traffic is not critical, really. Policy is not micromanagement. Let me further expand on the benefits of shift policy. My esteemed colleague would have mentioned smarter working hours and higher economic activity, increased productivity. Let me continue to extol the advantages of a national staggered hours workforce policy framework with the shift policy benefits. This policy works because it supports inclusivity and accessibility. It considers the family unit and their obligations, doesn't forget the disabled, and it also encompasses the religious among our peers. With the shift framework, private sector workers would now be privy to benefits now being experienced by those in the public sector. Private companies like Grace Kennedy, which implemented their own system of staggered hours, have sung praises to the move. It helps us as parents, caregivers, and yes, we are students as well, and people with health conditions to be more capable of managing their own responsibilities within and outside of the workplace. The shift policy allows broader interaction and access to goods and services that may have required taking time off to obtain or utilize these certain services. Inclusivity and accessibility across the entire workforce. That is equity. The accessibility aspect of national policy also goes in hand with smart working hours. In tandem, these will increase global competitivity and growth as many sectors seek and rely on foreign engagement that spans different geographies and time zones. Let's talk about flexible, improve work-life balance, and health. Mr. Tufton would have the perfect solution for you. We have the perfect solution for you, Mr. Tufton. Employees gain flexibility to align work with personal responsibilities, especially within families. Henry Ford recognized that a healthy employee with ample rest is a more productive employee. With a staggered hours system, the national workforce policy, more Jamaicans would be able to schedule their time for leisure and rest, study, manage their own small business, create content, I could go on, without further infringing on contracted work hours. The research supports our argument. Where there exists a work-life balance, we see improved work performances across the board, and that is our ultimate aim, a thriving, productive workforce, one that is motivated, driven, sustainable, healthy, and satisfied. Finally, let's be honest. The majority of our commute to work and from work is spent in traffic. My God. We post that a national staggered working hours policy framework will be advantageous as it will result in traffic reduction, infrastructure relief, expanded roads. Yeah, we can take that. Yes, sure, no problem. Only to have the same problem if everyone leaves from work or home at the same time. The fact is, time spent in traffic is a major bottleneck to Jamaica's productivity. In practice, less time in traffic means more time spent at home or doing something that you enjoy, nurturing your hobbies, building a business, spending time with the family, or even in some more work hours. That is possible. It also means that we don't arrive at our respective jobs already tired and worn out, boggled down by the traffic. Again, I'm suffering. A national workforce policy framework on staggered working hours will spread commuting over a wider time range. decreasing maximum traffic volume, reducing the volume to capacity ratio on our roads, and reducing the stress on our transportation infrastructure. In places like Ottawa, Belgium, South Korea, Kuala Lumpur, that is in Malaysia, staggered working hours have resulted in up to 25% reduced peak hour traffic volume. I could take that now. And environmental impact of idling vehicles that has been greatly reduced. Save on gas. In conclusion, let me reiterate that a national staggered working hours policy framework instituted for the entire workforce is the way to go. If we can implement smarter working hours, we will see higher economic output and increased productivity in a system that promotes inclusivity and accessibility, prioritizes a flexible work life, balance and reduces traffic congestion, impact on our transportation infrastructure and the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We now invite the second speaker from the Water Resources Authority.
Sorry. Okay. Good morning. As the second speaker, I stand to reaffirm our stance that staggered working hours should not be pursued as a national workforce policy, as it is not a critical issue, especially since the private sector already does it. Let's look at my opposition's points, right? They have the shift policy. S, smarter working hours. Does shifting the time really be the big solution, considering the private sector is for profit? They move with the market. If you're like First Global Bank, they open from 12 to 7 to fit the employees. They open on the weekend. Why should a policy be dictated because you didn't go to business school to maximize your profits where available? H, higher economic activity. Shifting time doesn't give you more money to spend. It doesn't decrease the cost or availability of housing, healthcare, childcare, food, etc. I, inclusivity. Shift workers are already a form of staggered working hours. There's a reason the public reform excludes shift employees. So the 1.4 million people that the private sector speaks of, only 17% are actually on a standard hour of 9 to 5. So why don't you do something else that will actually work for the majority of the population? Push for work from home, push for 4-day work week, push for more casual days, mental health days. You say F, flexible work life. Is it really? Again, push for the things that are actually going to help the majority of the people. We cannot make a policy for only 300,000 people when we have 2.8 in the island. Traffic reduction. Is staggered working hours really the solution? Why not fix the infrastructure that causes the traffic? The potholes all the time, the narrow roads, the fact that everybody lives in Portmore and has to come into Kingston and there are only 2 ways to get there. This is the problem that they need to fix. Our opponents are moving as if the reason we are not in Vision 2030 as of right now is because you can't work at 6 instead of 8. Again, public and private do not operate the same. A reform can be created to cater to the public because as public sector, whether we get customers or not, our mandate still happens. We still get paid, or we do not live off of profit. The private sector is for profit. They move their operations to maximize their profit. So if it is that they were able to implement staggered working hours, they already have, considering they have been doing it long before public sector decided to write this policy. They don't need the government to tell them how to run their business, especially since this is going to take up time for them to now reevaluate what they already have because you're now infringing on their operations. Again, private sector is for profit. We'd love to have as much free time as we want, but it cannot go before the operational capability of the business. Because if the business can't make money, you can come and go at any time you want, because you're not going to have no job. So let's be frank. Government overreach has never gone well. We have a history where the government makes policy decisions that affect the private sector without fully understanding the structural consequences. And it's the private sector, the workers, and the Jamaicans who absorb the cost when these decisions go wrong. Let's take FinSAC. The government's monetary policy choices destabilize the private financial institutions, causing them to intervene in 200 private companies to correct their own damage. And the bill came to $120 billion that Jamaica took 30 years to reduce, not even pay off. The proposition is now asking us to trust a government-designed scheduling policy imposed on a non-uniform private sector that it doesn't fully understand, without any enforcement infrastructure and no evidence base, and that it will produce the intended benefits and none of the unintended consequences. Jamaica has paid the price for that kind of confidence before. And if the proposition says, oh, if the policy doesn't fit your business, then don't use it. Then this policy isn't worth the paper it's printed on, as it's just a suggestion and a waste of time and taxpayers' money. And if it's just a suggestion, it doesn't need to be a policy, as this isn't a critical issue, since there wouldn't be any governing body to oversee its implementation and handle any complaints that may come up. For example, when minimum wage was increased, which is unilaterally agreed upon to be beneficial to the entire working class, there were so many problems and issues of non-compliance and unfair termination that the government had to create an entire department just to handle it, the pay and conditions of employment branch. And this is for a simple but critical issue of a uniform number. How can the proposition then push for a policy as complex as staggered times, managing employees spread out across the day, potential for employee abuse, with no compensation for extra work that cannot be properly documented? So typical government wants to put their hand in the pot, mess it up, and then leave it for them to deal with. Staggered working hours should be for the benefit of labor rights, and these benefits are exaggerated and cannot be substantiated by this policy. The clear documented and proven issues overwhelm any minuscule positives this ineffective policy may create. Again, this policy would only apply to about 300,000 persons in the country, the operations that more than likely already cannot handle it. Right, all right, I had 15 minutes, sorry, I forgot.
All right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the second period of cross-examination. This time, while the rules remain largely derivative, we will invite Team Proposition to pose their questions first.
So, morning again. The implementation of this policy is geared towards the advancement and correction of many issues. Do you understand or do you know the cost of sorting out each of the problems that we are addressing with this one policy that you are speaking of now?
Yes, I'm actually aware of the cost of all the issues that you are speaking of, all the solutions, because the government already has agencies in place to address these issues. If it's traffic, there's National Land Agency. If it's school or work-life balance, if it's school, there's a Ministry of Education. There's already varying agencies targeting each situation, tailored for each problem. It's not a ready-made solution to drape over your body. It's tailored for each problem.
So just to understand, the presence of agencies in each of these sectors, wouldn't it be prudent for the government to provide guidance to each of these agencies for the operation and for those who operate alongside them for greater economic benefit?
Operational guidance is passed down through the PS and through the head of the agencies, and then throughout their daily activities, including their corporation plans and their strategic plans. which they are already doing. This policy is redundant at best, at its very best, and damaging at its worst.
Thank you, Team Opposition. I noticed that you are speaking heavily about the public sector, but why wouldn't you implement this policy to benefit the private sector as well as in the implementation of this policy?
As my teammate already mentioned, that the private sector is adaptable, malleable, and are willing to change their operations in order to protect their bottom line. If the private sector can withstand a Category 5 hurricane or global earth-shattering pandemic, I'm sure they can handle the Gani at 4 o'clock.
All right, thank you very much. We now invite Team Opposition to pose their 3 questions.
Jamaica's roads are demonstrably clear during times when schools are closed, while yet offices remain open. Can you explain why office work times and staggered work hours are the primary congestion variable that this policy targets?
Thank you for that, Team Opposition, because everyone is at work and school at the same time. Can you imagine if there's a staggered system, then your 5 o'clock commute, which would get at home at 5:30, would result in you reaching home at 9 o'clock to see your wife?
If a private sector entity has 3 employees and cannot stagger hours without leaving the operation unmanned, what does your policy offer them?
No, so remember the staggered working hours is taking into consideration where your peak times are. It's not a situation where you will be having a gap within the day at any time of unmanned operation. So you have overlaps. If it is that you will need 2 individuals at 12, the manager will schedule those 2 individuals. One person can start 9, one person will start 10. But if you only need one person at 6 o'clock in the evening, that person who starts at 12 will be ending at 6 or wherever.
So by your own admission then, the policy isn't, so taking into consideration what you just said, would you agree that the policy would be redundant then because the managers or the employers have all the power necessary to craft their schedules?
So the aim of the policy is to make it available for those who may otherwise not have considered it before. It's a situation where a lot of businesses are operating in one way, them no better, at 8 to 5 you die a yard. This policy gives us the opportunity to change that.
In addition, the employees also have a part where they can choose hours that are also conducive to them without interfering in the day-to-day running of the business and the operation.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the second period of cross-examination. At this point in time, the debate is going to pause for 1 minute. We have 2 speakers remaining. These are the reply speakers from either team who will come and do their very best to convince the judges that their team has won. In aid of that quest, we will provide them 1 minute to finalize their reply speeches. That 1 minute break starts now. now invite the reply speaker from the Water Resources Authority to conclude this debate for side opposition. Hear, hear.
Distinguished judges, embattled opponents, and my fellow Jamaicans, good morning. I am charged with delivering the closing remarks. As I strive to drive home the points and themes carefully crafted by my teammates and refute the ones held together by a hostage situation executed by my opponents, I'd like to remind everyone that the government exists to serve its people. It's there to make their day bearable. I believe it is imperative that we come to recognize the government as a useful tool established by a self-regulating civilization. However, much like an autoimmune disease, the mechanisms set in place for regulation and protection can often lead to its own harm. The solutions put in place that are being suggested today are like a key for a lock that are of similar brands but are not from the same make. Sure, the key might fit, but try as you may, that key will never open that lock. That's like suggesting that this policy will address traffic when this policy affects economic markets and not social logistic problems. At best, this is redundant and government overreach. At worst, it is a deleterious force that the economy has to, or the market has to adjust to. You are trying to ask the government to fix traffic congestion when civil engineers exist. Not only that, civil engineers are employed by the government. That is their job. The crux of your theme rests on the IFT in shift, inclusivity, but inclusive for who? If the majority of the private sector is already on shift work, are primarily on freelance, or are part of the gig economy, then they're already online, then they're already meeting their customers. Who is this policy for? Flexible work-life balance. I'm going to be frank, forgive my insolence, but flexible work-life balance is not a concept for poor people. Poor people are maximizing their earnings however they can, they're working, they're filling as much time as possible being productive. A work-life balance requires money, and it would be better if you increase everyone's wages than to actually stagger the time, limit the times that you're able to work. Traffic reduction. This policy is blind to inadequate carriageways, crash hotspots, and overall indiscipline on the road. These are major contributors to traffic that just aren't being addressed. By your own words in the cross-section, you mentioned that shift workers are already playing to the rules that are already benefiting them. You mentioned the BPO sector and the emergency sectors. So that means that this policy actually only brings in the 17% of the workforce into the fold, a drop in the bucket that does not address the problems that we are already laid down on the table. You mentioned Ottawa and Kuala Lumpur as examples of how staggered work hours benefit those countries and how they could benefit Jamaica. Ottawa and Kuala Lumpur, you recognize the differences between them and Jamaica. A strong, bustling economy with strong transportation sectors, with adequate management of their infrastructure. A developed nation versus a small island developing state. Apples to oranges. Earlier I mentioned that the market is malleable, self-regulating and adaptable, capable of handling a Category 5 hurricane or even a globe-shattering pandemic. We no longer have free refills because we recognize that wet communal spaces is a beautiful transportation center for viruses to jump on the Patrick bus home to his family of 4. If you cannot get to the bank is online. You cannot get to the grocers now deliver. A business operator is going to find the best way to protect their bottom line and get to their customers. Government overreach to them is just another external force that they have to meander through, much like a global pandemic or a Category 5 hurricane. Thank you so much for listening to me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. And now to conclude this debate, we invite the final speaker from Team Cannabis Licensing Authority.
esteemed judges, my worthy opponents, teammates, big up. Judges, the opposition is sincere in their position, but they are sincerely wrong. First, let me address some key issues. Their policy or their debate is centered around governance interference. Let me first debunk that. Government does not interfere. They provide governance, they provide structure by which the populace can pull down upon, modify, and implement for drive of change. Second thing, they say that the policy is cost effective. It's going to be costly. They have yet to be proven that. Dear honorable judges, I want to bring you back to the attention of what we are speaking about today. We are saying we are driving a policy that is going to implement change, not only for a minute minority that they would want to propose, but for all of Jamaica. Government has a responsibility for Jamaica, and everyone is to be accounted for. Therefore, we propose the shift policy. And in this shift policy, we are saying that it is sustainable. It is sustainable because the hours being worked is staggered. It is staggered, therefore, employers and employees are able to determine the best outcome and the best output, maximizing efficiency. We're saying that this policy increases work-life balance because the hustle mentality of the poor that they want to implement, we're saying no. Persons now have a free time where they are not impeding on their work hours, but they can even start a business. They now have leisure time to spend with family. They have leisure time to actually relax so they can be more productive at work in their biological clock, in their optimal time during the day. We are saying that the traffic situation, if it is reduced, will also reduce the infrastructure and damages that is creating the potholes, which they want to spend and pump money to fix. We are saying if there's a reduction in these things, then there would not be a need to go ahead and to pump money just to fix a problem. We are giving a solution at the root and at the core. We are speaking about inclusivity and accessibility. I cannot go to a bank online and get pulled down on $100 million. No, I'd have to go in, get a manager's check that is not available online towards me. I need to go to the bank on the weekends or later hours. There are many things. I would like to ask my opposition, how long did it take them to get to this meeting today? Well, if they had other flexible work hours, probably about 10 o'clock now, I would just be on my way to work. Because of my staggered hours, I can now maximize my time in the morning. I look good. I can go to the gym. In the evening, I can spend time with my family. I'm saying this policy is for Jamaica. It is for everyone, and government has the responsibility to take care of the populace. No one is to be excluded. The policy is not a mandate, as they would want to propose, that it is law. Policies guide laws, regulations guide laws, and therefore, for those who do not have access or do not know about, they can pull down on such a policy, benefit from it, and they can implement it. Where is the harm done? Jamaica, team opposition, it is a righteous thing for the government to look out for Jamaica, not just exclude 350, which is wrong, by the way, by our calculations, but we should exclude no one. We're saying that this policy from government ought to be implemented because it is the benefit of all, and we have proposed the shift policy. So let's shift the paradigm from the shift system that they're talking about, the regular 8 hours just at different times, to the staggered system, which we're pronouncing. Judges, recalibrate, refocus. I know you're ready to confuse, but I'm here to bring you back into focus. We're talking about staggered hours. We're talking about implementation of policy. Judges, make the right decision, not for this competition, but for Jamaica. I rest.
Let's have one final round of applause. Some great arguments were raised both for and against the Moot. The Moot, for those who may have just joined, that was debated by the Cannabis Licensing Authority and the Water Resources Authority, was be it resolved that staggered working hours in Jamaica should be pursued as a national workforce policy rather than as a reform limited to the public sector. The arguments have been made, and the judges will now deliberate, and we will use that time to refresh ourselves and hopefully have some consensus between the two teams. I'm sure that won't happen. But the next person from which you will hear is the chief adjudicator, who will sum up the match and announce the winner. For those of you who are online, are you for or against the Moot? Which team you believe had the stronger arguments? Tell us in the comments. Stay tuned and we'll be right back.
right, ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed the first match in the public sector debate competition for 2026, where we saw the Cannabis Licensing Authority in proposition face off against the Water Resource Authority. The motion questioned whether or not the government of Jamaica should be pushing forward with some sort of policy or implementation of the staggered work hours as they exist in the public sector and do so in the private sector. So then what did we hear from these debaters? Well, the first speaker came to us and he told us about this new and innovative idea that he likes to call SHIFT. That is the name of the policy, and the policy takes into consideration things such as smarter working, higher economic output, inclusivity, flexibility, and a reduction in traffic. That pretty much summarizes this entire SHIFT idea. And he tells us that this is going to come with some great outcomes, some great benefits. A large part of that came down to this question of how it is that staggered work hours in the private sector can yield great results when we look at how it has in the public sector. He told us about, for example, that we can get greater work-life balance and greater productivity, and how it will definitely go ahead and reduce traffic. Now, how did the judges look at this particular policy and the substantive that came out of team proposition? We think they're really interesting. We think for a policy as complex and as robust as SHIFT, we wanted to hear a lot more about it. For example, we wanted to understand in no uncertain terms how this produces greater productivity. We wanted to understand in no uncertain terms how we get greater economic activity coming out of this. And we think that it's almost kind of intuitive, but at this stage what we really want is to hear the ideas coming out. How is it that flexi work or staggered work hours increases productivity? It's not sufficient to just give us a one-liner about it. This is a big claim, and it's really important to your case, and so you need a lot of warranting coming out of it, right? And we found that in general, there was a running kind of deficiency that existed on proposition, really interesting claims and ideas that we definitely wanted some deeper appreciation for. Now, on team Water Resources Authority, we get this idea coming out particularly from their first speaker, that there already exists an act or policy, and therefore there's no need for this. Now, in the base, we have something that we call a proposition fiat. It is intuitive that proposition gets to argue the debate. And so if it is that there already exists a policy that exists in status quo, therefore there's no need for us to be doing anything more, then we can't have a debate, right? There needs to be something more that can be done. There needs to be some sort of pushing forward of this policy, more emphasis being placed on that policy, the pushing forward of that policy, and that is pretty much what the debate is asking. So the existence of frameworks already doesn't necessarily make it so that PROB can't bring the framework, or it can't push forward this particular idea, lest we don't have a debate. And so we want to caution Team WRA on being a little bit more charitable as regards to that. But then what did we get substantively? We got this really interesting idea coming out of WRA that, well, quite frankly, the private sector is already incentivized to do all of these wonderful things that this policy that is coming out from CLA wants to do. They tell us that the private sector is flexible and that they're profit-driven. And these are two key tenets of the private sector that make it so that the things that this policy wants to do, private sector is already incentivized to do. They tell us, for example, that Grace Kennedy and FGB, funnily enough, subsidiaries of each other, but two examples brought forward nonetheless, do these kind of things. We see FGB, for example, staggering their work hours, where normal banking operations are from 9 to 2 o'clock. FGB, by virtue of being profit-driven and flexible and having those incentives, has shifted their opening windows from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. They tell us as well that these kinds of innovations that exist in the private sector are so meaningful that we can bank online, we can have our groceries developed, and that this is something that is going to happen intrinsically within the private sector. We find that compelling. We find that really interesting.
We think, however, that there are other parts of the private sector that aren't as, flexible as a Grace Kennedy or a FGB. We think that there are other medium and small enterprises who won't be that bold in pushing forward in terms of this. And that goes greatly into your claim of awareness. We heard this particularly coming out from the third speaker, this really interesting idea that when the government of Jamaica pushes this forward, what you actually get is a greater deal of awareness of this staggered work hours within the private sector, something that may not exist as right now. We think that's compelling. We wanted to hear a little bit more about that, and we wanted to hear it earlier on in the debate. Other arguments that came out as well, questions of government overreach and enforcement. If government is going to institute a policy, then they must ensure that there are frameworks to actually institute the policy, and that's going to come with resources and that kind of thing. The last thing I want to say before I announce the winner and best debater of this match is a caution to both teams about the importance of mutual exclusivity. For example, if CLA says, well, what we need to do is solve for traffic, yes, and this is going to solve for traffic, it's not a sufficient counter-argument to say what we should do is fix the roads, because they're not mutually exclusive, right? I can implement this shift program and fix the potholes in the road, and then CLA gets to have their cake and eat it too, right? We think that's like something we want to caution them for, but what was really to your credit is an appreciation of how it is that the real problem towards alleviating traffic is not one that flexi work is going to solve, such as schools having staggered areas in which they operate and these kind of bottlenecks that are going to happen around peak hours nevertheless. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with all that said and all of that brilliant analysis out of the way, you want to hear who won this match. And so the team that wins this first match and will be advancing, well, both teams advance to the next preliminary round, but one team will be advancing with 3 points by virtue of winning this match. And that team is the Water Resources Authority. Congratulations to the Water Resources Authority. Better luck next time, team Cannabis Licensing Authority. A round of applause for them as well. The best debater from this match comes to us from the winning team, the Water Resources Authority, and that is the second speaker. Your breaking down of the arguments that came from proposition could be accurately defined as clinical. Congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the first match in this room. Join us in a few moments where we will see the upcoming match, that is match number 2. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, have a lovely rest of your day.